Claire Jensen had fixed everything from busted engines to broken promises. But when she bought a seized cargo ship at a government auction site unseen, she never expected to find the entire lower deck sealed shut with reinforced steel. What lay inside had been forgotten for decades, and unlocking it would unravel a secret buried by time, war, and someone who never wanted it found. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if stories like this give you chills, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode might just reveal something even more unbelievable. Let's get started. The auctioneer didn't even try to sell it hard. Lot 147, seized asset from international waters. No known cargo. Buyer assumes all liability. The photo was a grainy satellite shot of a freighter anchored off a crumbling dock in a forgotten part of the port. No interior shots, no inspection window, just a starting bid of $1,200 and no takers. That is, until Claire Jensen raised her hand. She hadn't planned to buy anything that day. The local auction house mostly flipped impounded motorcycles, stolen trucks, or the occasional boat that someone forgot to pay taxes on. But something about that listing tugged at her. Maybe it was the silence around it. The way no one else even looked twice. She knew from years under the hood that the loudest machines didn't always hold the most power. Sometimes it was the quiet ones. Claire was a mechanic by trade, but her curiosity was a living thing. She ran a small harborside repair shop inherited from her uncle. Old yachts, rusted-out speedboats. Every now and then, someone with more money than sense would ask her to restore a classic. But work had been thin lately, and this freighter, well, it felt like a gamble worth taking. When the auctioneer slammed the gavel down, she half expected someone to stop her. No one did. 2 days later, she stood on the pier, boots planted on sun-cracked concrete, staring up at the ship she'd just bought. It looked even bigger in person. Rust crept like ivy along the hull. The name had been scraped off, only the outline of letters remained. A battered chain hung from the open cargo bay door like an invitation, or a warning. She tightened her ponytail and stepped forward. Inside, the air was thick with salt and dust. Light poured in through fractured windows above, slicing shadows across steel walls. The floor echoed under her boots. Somewhere in the dark, a seagull cried. She made her way toward the rear, scanning for signs of life or anything of value. What she found was stranger than she'd imagined. Tucked beneath the main floor, accessible only by a narrow staircase and half hidden under tarp and grime, was a second cargo bay. But its door, unlike the others, was welded shut. Thick bolts. Reinforced plates. No lock, no handle, just metal that screamed, "Keep out!" Claire's hand rested on the edge of the door, cool and damp. Her heart thudded once, then again. She didn't know what was behind it. But something in her gut said this wasn't just storage. This was a secret, and she had just bought her way into it. The second morning came with a sky the color of dull pewter, the harbor still and thick with mist. Claire stood on the main deck with a thermos of cheap black coffee in one hand, her other hand resting lightly on the rusted rail. Below her, the water barely moved, like even the ocean was holding its breath. The ship groaned softly in the dock, old metal settling, whispering stories it hadn't told in decades. She'd spent the night before crawling through the upper levels, most of it stripped bare. The crew quarters were emptied out, mattresses rotted to springs, cupboards gutted, walls covered in peeling paint and water stains. A single photograph had been left taped inside a locker. A group of men in uniforms, blurry smiles under hard hats, the sea wide behind them. No names, no date. There was no ship's log, no black box, no sign of a manifest or registry, and that in itself was strange. Even the rustiest ghost ship should have had a paper trail, but this one felt erased. Wiped clean, sanitized, like someone had gone through every inch and removed anything that hinted at where it had come from or what it had once carried, except for that welded door. Claire hadn't stopped thinking about it since the moment she saw it. Welds that thick didn't just say, "Do not enter." They screamed it. And the location, buried beneath layers of cargo access points and camouflaged by junk, was too deliberate to be accidental. She ran her gloved fingers along the weld seams again that morning. "What the hell were you hiding?" she whispered. The ship didn't answer, but it didn't have to. Something about this place, this massive iron beast with no name, told her enough. It had been silenced. On purpose. Claire wasn't easily rattled. She grew up in scrapyards, ran her first oil change before she could legally drive, and had crawled inside enough engine bays to make claustrophobia a joke. But the quiet here, it wasn't just stillness. It was tension. Like the ship was waiting for her to make a mistake. She stepped back from the door, trying to piece it together. If it was cargo, why weld it shut? If it was dangerous, why abandon it instead of destroy it? And if it was nothing, why erase the ship's entire history? She went back to the main deck, pulled out her tablet, and started cross-referencing the ship's visible ID numbers with international databases. No hits. Not a single registry, not even a decommissioned vessel list. She tried the engine numbers. Nothing. It was like the ship had never existed, which meant someone wanted it that way. Claire leaned back against the wall, staring out at the fog curling over the harbor. She could walk away, call it a bust, scrap the metal and maybe break even. But she didn't. Because there was something about this ship, something deeper than rust and rot, something waiting to be found. And Claire Jensen wasn't in the habit of walking away from questions that needed answers. By the third day, the silence wasn't just unsettling, it was personal. Claire stood in front of the bolted door again, headlamp strapped to her forehead, sparks dancing in her peripheral vision from where she'd tested her angle grinder the night before. The metal was thick, thicker than standard hull plating, and the weld lines were unusually clean. Precision work, military grade, maybe. Not the kind of quick and dirty patch job you'd expect on an old freighter. This wasn't a door that had rusted shut. It was a door meant never to be opened again. Until now. She inhaled deeply, adjusted her gloves, and fired up the grinder. The shriek of metal on metal split the air like a scream. Sparks scattered across the floor, bouncing against the steel like fireflies. Claire leaned into the cut, focused, steady. Her world shrank to the sound, the light, the vibration rattling through her arms. It took over an hour to make the first real incision. The blade wore down faster than expected, the door steel denser than anything she'd handled. She had to stop twice to cool the grinder, and once to change discs. Sweat soaked the back of her shirt despite the chill in the air, but she didn't stop. When she finally sliced through the last weld, there was a distinct creak, not from the grinder, not from her tools, but from the door itself. A groan, low and ancient, like the ship had just exhaled for the first time in years. Claire stepped back, killed the grinder, and waited. Nothing happened. She grabbed the crowbar next, jammed it into the seam she'd created, and heaved. The door resisted at first, then gave. Slowly, inch by inch, the seam widened until, with a heavy clunk, the slab of steel shifted inward. Dust burst from the crack, thick and choking. She coughed, waved it away, then raised her headlamp. What she saw beyond the threshold didn't make sense. It wasn't a storage bay, not like the rest of the ship. It was a chamber. Tall, symmetrical, lined with ribbed metal walls and overhead lights that flickered weakly, as if drawing power from some long-forgotten backup generator. The space was empty, or so she thought, until the dust settled and her light caught the edges of a shape. No, 3 shapes. Machines. Huge, dark, and covered with tarps stretched taut like skin over muscle. Their silhouettes didn't match anything Claire recognized. Not cargo loaders, not industrial engines. They looked more like pods, engines, something in between. She took a cautious step inside. The air was heavy, stale, with a faint tang of old oil and something else, ozone maybe, or decay. Her boots echoed strangely, like the space didn't want her there. She approached the nearest object, her light dancing across its curved surface. There were markings numbers that had been burned off with a torch. Only one word remained, stenciled faintly in red near the top. Section 9. Claire's breath caught. She had no idea what that meant, but something told her. She'd just opened a door that should have stayed closed. Claire didn't move at first. She just stood there, light shaking ever so slightly in her grip as it played over the massive object in front of her. It wasn't just the size or the secrecy of it that got to her. It was the feeling deep in her chest, like she'd stumbled into something built to be forgotten. She had opened a sealed chamber in a ship with no records, and now stood face to face with machines that didn't belong in any textbook. She stepped closer, reaching up to the tarp that hung like a shroud. The fabric was stiff with age, smelling of mildew and salt. With a sharp tug, she pulled it back, and the light from her headlamp fell on metal that was too smooth, too engineered to be anything ordinary. Not rusted, not even scratched. It looked untouched. The object beneath was cylindrical, nearly 10 feet long, with vent-like ridges running its side. Faint etchings in the metal had been buffed out or burned away, and a thick cable coiled from one end like a snake frozen mid-strike. Claire circled it slowly, taking mental inventory of every feature. It wasn't an engine, not any kind she'd seen. There were no exhaust ports, no mounting brackets, no sign of it ever being part of the ship's mechanical systems. It was cargo, deliberate cargo, and someone had gone to extreme lengths to make sure no one could identify it. She moved to the second tarp-covered structure. As she peeled it back, her breath caught again. This one was similar, but not identical, slightly smaller, with a different panel configuration. It had an access hatch, and it was unlocked. Claire crouched down, fingers trembling just enough to make the latch resist her grip. She steadied herself and pulled. Inside was a cavity lined with some kind of padding. Foam? No, gel. And in the center, a hollow cradle, like something was meant to fit in it. Or someone. Claire stepped back, heart pounding now. These weren't engines. They weren't cargo haulers or power cores. They were containment pods. Suddenly, the quiet didn't feel passive. It felt watched. She turned to the far wall. That's when she saw the control panel, covered in grime, but intact. Buttons with faded Cyrillic labels. Soviet. She knew enough from her Cold War-era restoration jobs to recognize the script. One button had been smashed inward, a jagged hole in the panel sparking gently when she touched it. This wasn't some rogue science project. This was military. Deep, Black Ops level. Her throat dried. She took one last scan of the room. 3 pods. 1 open, 2 sealed. Markings removed. Control panel disabled. And the word Section 9, barely visible again on the far wall, painted in the same red stenciling as before. Not a section number. A program name. A project. Claire backed out slowly, sealing the chamber behind her not with a lock, just a sense of finality. She didn't know what she was in the middle of, but she knew one thing for sure now. This wasn't just an abandoned ship. It was a buried chapter in history, and someone had just unearthed it. The following morning, Claire returned to the chamber, armed with 2 things. A thermos of lukewarm coffee, and a nagging sense that she was already in over her head. She hadn't told anyone. Not Leo, the part-time welder she occasionally hired. Not her landlord who kept asking about her rent. Not even Mrs. Alvarez at the parts yard who always made her spill secrets over donuts. Because whatever was inside that chamber, it wasn't just unusual. It was classified. Or it had been, once. She made her way back down the narrow stairwell into the sealed hold, flashlight flickering slightly as it illuminated the chamber's cold, symmetrical guts. The pods sat there, like sleeping giants. She approached the sealed one on the far left, still covered. Something had changed in her overnight. The fear was still there, sure, but now it was curiosity, sharpened like a blade. She peeled back the tarp again, slower this time, more respectful somehow. The structure underneath was smooth, too smooth. No visible screws, no seams. Claire had restored plenty of old machinery generators, compressors, even experimental engine blocks. But this thing, it wasn't built to be repaired. It was built to never be opened again. She ran her hand across the surface. It was cool, but not cold. Not metallic, exactly. Some kind of alloy? She rapped her knuckles gently against the shell. It didn't ring like steel. It was dense, heavy, engineered with purpose. At the back, she noticed a cluster of nozzles, not quite like thrusters, but close. Aerodynamic, maybe even submersible? The longer she stared, the more impossible it felt. Whatever these machines were, they were beyond her understanding, and that terrified her. Because Claire Jensen wasn't someone easily impressed. She'd built engines from scratch and rebuilt muscle cars that roared louder than thunder. She had dirt in her veins and gears in her mind. But this didn't belong in any textbook, any museum, any known catalog of tech. She took a step back, snapped a photo on her phone, then another. As she angled for a wider shot, her foot brushed something small and metallic beneath the workbench that had rusted into the corner of the room. A nameplate, bent, scorched at one end, but mostly intact. She knelt, brushing off dust and grime, until the words became visible, faded, barely readable. Project Nova, divided by USSR. Naval Special Division, divided by Prototype 2 of 5. Claire froze. Prototype. 5 of them? Only 3 were here. She sat down hard on the cold floor, mind spinning. If this was a prototype, where were the others? And who had tried to erase this one from existence? Suddenly, her phone screen went black. Dead. She frowned. The battery had been nearly full. She pressed the power button. Nothing. Static crackled from the overhead intercom speaker, dead for decades. Now, briefly alive, with a burst of sound. Claire's breath hitched. This ship wasn't just holding a secret. It was starting to wake up. Claire didn't sleep that night. Not really. She paced the narrow hallway of her dockside apartment, mind racing in circles. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the word prototype. Every time she blinked, she heard that static echo from the ship's long-dead intercom. A warning, maybe. Or a signal. Either way, the ship wasn't as silent as it seemed. By morning, she was back on board, hands trembling slightly around her coffee thermos as she descended into the belly of the freighter. This time, she brought more than tools, a portable scanner, her old military-grade flashlight, and a notepad her uncle used to call the backup brain. Her mission, to find anything resembling records. A blueprint, a system log, a leftover shipping form, something that could tell her why the ship had been hidden, what Project Nova was, and what exactly she had accidentally uncovered. She started near the sealed bay, rushing aside old tool chests, cracked crates, and cabinets long since rusted shut. For nearly an hour, nothing, just debris, forgotten junk. Then she found it tucked inside a wall panel that had been partially unscrewed. A small metal drawer, the kind used on old Soviet ships to store maintenance manuals or classified reports. The latch was stiff, but after a few solid taps with her socket wrench, it popped open. Inside was a single plastic-wrapped folder. Water-damaged, warped, but still legible. Claire sat down on a nearby crate, peeled the plastic off, and opened it carefully. It wasn't a full manifest, more like fragments. Broken pages, shipping labels, engineering stamps. Some were in Russian. Others had been redacted with thick black lines. But a few words stood out. Section 9, divided by Directive 04 Delta. Bio-reactive containment units, 3 of 5. Vessel transfer. Approved. Cargo origin. Arkhangelsk, Black Sea facility. Cargo destination. Delayed indefinitely by order of internal tribunal. And then, handwritten in red ink, scrawled along the edge of a page, do not open. Units remain unstable. Host systems untested. Captain ordered sealed transport only. Claire's hands tightened around the paper. Unstable. Host systems. Bio-reactive containment. She didn't like the sound of any of it. She flipped to the last page, a torn corner of a shipping ledger. Most of it unreadable, but one entry remained. Manifest discrepancy, unresolved. Third unit reported compromised during transfer. Security advised minimal exposure window. Her stomach turned. Third unit, compromised. Had it been removed before arrival? Or was it one of the 3 still on board already damaged when the ship was sealed? The open pod she'd seen flashed in her mind. That gel-lined cavity. The empty space. Like something was once cradled inside it. And had left. She rose to her feet, heart pounding now in her ears. The ship creaked around her, not like settling steel, but like breath through old lungs. Each footstep echoed too loud, too long. Claire didn't know what she'd bought anymore, but it wasn't just metal and rust. It was a secret someone tried very hard to bury, and now, she was standing right in the middle of it. The knock at her shop door came just before sundown. Claire wasn't expecting anyone. Most days, the world left her alone, a woman who preferred machines over people, grease over small talk. But when she opened the door and saw the man standing there, she knew instantly. This wasn't a parts delivery. He was tall, stiff in posture despite the weathered lines in his face. A coat too formal for the docks hung from his shoulders, and tucked beneath one arm was a folder, the kind used for briefings, not blueprints. Claire Jensen? His voice was low, precise. Eastern European, maybe. That depends who's asking, she replied, crossing her arms. He gave a nod, more respectful than friendly. My name is Lieutenant Mikhail Arkhanov, retired. A pause. Formerly of the Soviet Navy. Claire didn't speak. She stepped aside instead, wordlessly motioning for him to enter. Whatever he knew, she needed it. Inside, she offered no coffee, no chair, just space and questions. I know what you found, he said, setting the folder down on her workbench. Or at least, what you think you've found. Claire raised an eyebrow. You saying it's not a Cold War relic sealed with secrets and bad intentions? He gave a small, humorless chuckle. I'm saying it's worse. He opened the folder, revealing a grainy black and white photograph. The same ship, same hull, but a different name stenciled across the bow. Volchitsa Russian, for she-wolf. M-1983, he said. This ship was part of Project Nova, a secret initiative run by Section 9, the Soviet Defense Science Division. The goal was containment. Of what most of us didn't even know, just whispers. Claire leaned in, eyes narrowing on the second photo. The interior chamber, the pods, just like the one she'd seen, only these were full. Shadows behind frosted glass. What were they containing? She asked. Mikhail didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a yellowed document marked with the red triangle of Soviet biohazard classification. During the Cold War, we were desperate for superiority, he said, weaponizing everything: biology, radiation, even psychology. Project Nova was the attempt to create mobile, reactive systems that could adapt and survive. Like AI? Claire asked. He shook his head. No, worse. Biological engineered systems. Semi-organic engines designed to interface with human nervous systems. Machines that didn't just respond, they felt. Learned. Reacted. Grew. She stepped back, the chill in her spine undeniable. And what happened to the project? It failed, he said. Horribly. One of the prototypes. Prototype 3 went rogue. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way. It simply stopped responding, then vanished. People died. Records were burned. The ship was sealed, forgotten, except it wasn't, Claire said. Because now it's mine. Mikhail nodded grimly. Which means you're in danger. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent light above. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "Not what I want," he said. "What they want." Claire's stomach turned. "They know the ship's been disturbed," Mikhail said, his voice now barely above a whisper. "And they're coming." The harbor was dark when Claire returned to the ship, the sky choked with low clouds that pressed like hands against the water. She moved fast, her flashlight beam jittering across the walkway as if it too was afraid. Mikhail's warning had changed everything. Whatever this ship had once carried wasn't just dangerous, it was still being watched. And now, she was standing between the secret and the people who had tried to bury it. Inside the cargo bay, she moved straight to the hidden chamber. The air felt different, thicker, the kind of stillness that didn't come from emptiness, but from expectation. She didn't pause at the threshold, didn't hesitate. The ship already knew she was there. She had to know more. Claire moved toward the rusted control panel, pulled open the lower access plate she hadn't noticed before, and found what she was hoping for: a narrow data slot, covered in corrosion. Carefully, she cleaned the port and connected her portable drive. The system flickered, then stuttered to life. No boot screen, no password prompt, just a single folder labeled in Cyrillic, Protocol Zvezda, Protocol Zvezda. Inside, schematic files, dozens, system diagrams, biometric sync charts, hull schematics, and tucked between them, a series of personal logs. The first one opened automatically. A male voice played through her earpiece, soft, Russian accented, tired. Test log 041. Unit 3 no longer responds to neurological input. Host interface failed. Organic growth present inside containment matrix. We've recommended decommission, but command refuses. They say the unit has evolved. I say it has escaped us. Claire's pulse spiked. She opened a second file, an image, a cross-section blueprint of the very pod she'd examined. But this one showed what had once been inside, a curled structure, vaguely human, part muscle, part machine, not alive, not dead, contained. The final file was encrypted, but attached was a handwritten note, English this time. To whoever finds this ship. If you're reading this, it means they didn't destroy her. That was their plan. Sink her. Erase her. Pretend Nova never happened. But the tech was too valuable. They hid it instead. One of them is still active. Maybe listening. Maybe learning. It took something from me, my brother, his body, his mind. Whatever this ship holds, it isn't finished. And it won't stop. If you open the bay, you've already started it. You have two choices now. Burn the ship, finish what we couldn't, and expose it. But know this. Once you choose, you don't get to walk away. Claire sat back, heart pounding. The pieces fit now. The open pod, the missing prototype, the static in the intercom, the file calling it active. She wasn't just standing on an old Soviet relic. She was standing inside. Something alive, something with memory. The ship wasn't just waking up. It was waiting. Claire didn't sleep. Again. She spent the night on the floor of the ship's former captain's quarters, knees drawn to her chest, blueprints spread around her like haunted wallpaper. The words from the note echoed in her head like a ticking clock. Burn it. Or expose it. But both came with a price, and neither promised survival. At dawn, she emerged onto the deck, the sea mist curling around her boots. The harbor was quiet. Too quiet. Even the gulls stayed away now, as if they knew the ship had changed. Something in its silhouette looked more alert. The shadows beneath the hull felt deeper. She heard it before she saw it. A soft whump of tires on gravel. A black SUV rolling to a stop at the dock's edge. Two men stepped out, government suits, sharp, tailored, but worn like uniforms. The taller one adjusted his coat and raised a megaphone to his mouth. "Miss Jensen," he said, voice calm, practiced, rehearsed. "We need to speak." Claire didn't move from the top rail. "You're a day late," she shouted back. I already know. The shorter man pulled a tablet from his jacket and tapped something. A screen lit up on the side of their SUV, satellite imagery. Live feed. Her ship. Her location. You're in possession of a foreign military asset, the first man said. You're also in violation of 4 maritime containment protocols. We're not here to argue. We're here to retrieve what belongs to us. Claire crossed her arms. Does belong include something that killed its original host? Or does that just fall under classified technicalities? No answer. Just stillness. I know what's down there, she continued, and I know what you tried to erase. The taller agent stepped forward. And you're not thinking clearly. Oh, I'm thinking real clear, Claire said. This thing, this bioengineered parasite you left in a floating tomb, it's active. It's learning. It's possibly not alone. And if you think I'm just going to hand it over, you've misread me. The shorter man leaned into the SUV and retrieved a black case. Unsnapped it, pulled free a contract. We're prepared to make this go away, the first agent said. Payment, silence, immunity, but we need access. Today. Claire looked at the folder. Then at the ship. She could walk away. Take the payout. Let the machine disappear into another shadow. Another lie. But then she remembered the voice on the recording. Finish what we couldn't. No deal, she said. The agents didn't blink. Instead, they reached for radios. Claire didn't wait. She ran, back down the stairs, back through the main corridor, back to the sealed chamber. The control panel glowed faintly now, like it had been watching the whole time. She jammed in her drive, pulled up the last schematic, found the override. She could sync it. 1 button, 1 code. She could flood the chamber and send the whole ship to the bottom of the harbor. No payout, no legacy. Just silence. But she hesitated, because maybe, just maybe, there was another way. Claire stood in front of the control panel, sweat slick on her palms, the override code blinking on the cracked screen. 1 press. That was all it would take. The chamber would flood. The ship would go under, and whatever lived or waited inside those pods would be lost to the sea forever. But so would the truth. Her thumb hovered over the confirm key. She saw her reflection in the panel, grease-smudged, eyes wild, hair pulled back into a crooked knot. She looked like someone who should run, but deep down, she knew. This wasn't about escape. It was about choice and legacy. She stepped back, heart pounding. If she destroyed it, they'd cover it up again. Say it never existed. That she made it up. A woman chasing ghosts on an abandoned freighter. But if she kept it afloat, documented everything, exposed it to the world, then maybe, just maybe, the truth would survive. Claire turned off the override. She wasn't going to drown this secret. She was going to finish the story. 2 days later, the story broke. Not through a newspaper, not through the suits and their quiet threats, but through Claire's own hands. A live stream, raw footage, a full readout of the files, the schematics, the chamber, the pods, the recordings, the name, Project Nova. Within hours, it spread. Forums exploded. Analysts speculated. Cold War veterans chimed in with half-remembered warnings. We heard rumors, one said. A ghost ship, a failed weapon, a living engine. Within days, the government denied everything, but it was too late. Claire had already sent backups to a dozen independent archives. She'd uploaded the logs to open-source networks. And she wasn't alone. Mikhail returned, quiet and steady, and stood beside her in interviews. Others came forward, 2 old technicians, whistleblowers, people who had spent decades buried under silence. Each one added another thread. But the ship remained hers. She had it moved to a private dock funded by a group of tech historians and independent researchers who believed the world had a right to know. They helped her secure it, study it, monitor it. They worked around the pods carefully, never opening, never probing, just listening. And the strangest thing? Nothing ever moved again. The ship never spoke. The pods never changed. It was as if the active truth of finally being seen had silenced the beast inside. Claire still didn't know if that was mercy or a warning. But she stayed. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood now. Some machines don't just carry cargo. They carry memory, grief, guilt, secrets too heavy for history to bear. She kept the ship not as a monument, but as a reminder that even rusted steel can hold the weight of what the world tries to forget. And sometimes, it takes a mechanic, someone used to fixing the broken, to hold it all together, to remember, to protect, to choose legacy over silence, and never look away again.